Again, good evening, everyone. I will call the public session of the November 16, 2020 meeting of the Woodbridge Board of Education to order at 7:08 p.m. I would like to remind everyone to kindly mute the microphone to avoid background noise unless you're speaking. Okay, on our agenda this evening, first item on the agenda is correspondence. Megan, do we have any correspondence?
Hi, Lynn. Yes, we do. We do have some posted in e-meeting, KBE meeting, and essentially that is, there's 3 letters there, but it represents 11 families and 30 or 32 teachers. I wasn't sure. 2 of the signatures, I wasn't sure if it was additional or not, but 30 or 32 teachers. And basically they are all in fairly strong support of maintaining the in-person model at the school. In addition to what we have posted there, we also received, as the board, some additional private emails from families to the Board of Education that also support of maintaining in-person learning. And in addition to that, we did receive a few weeks ago, we did receive a letter from the diversity committee interested in their input for the hiring of new superintendent.
Megan, can I just ask, so the letter that was sent in by the teachers, was it teachers, TAs? What was the mix, the percentage of each?
Joyce, I actually don't know. I just saw the letter about an hour ago. It's posted in e-meeting and it has all the names, but it doesn't say what their role is. So I'm not sure off the top of my head, but that's a good question.
So just say staff members then. 30,
right,
30,
staff members. Sorry.
Yeah, it just seemed to me
there were
that
teachers and staff members, yes.
Yeah, it seemed like it was mostly TAs, but I just wanted confirmation from someone.
Okay, thanks.
That did not appear to be the case from when I read the names. So I think it's safe if we don't make any statement like that. The names are there, they can stand alone, and we'll just have staff members.
Oh, I think Lynn's having a hard time connection.
Thank you, Megan.
She's freezing up a bit. I don't know if you want to take over for a little bit, Joyce. So Lynn has.
Yes, okay. I don't have the agenda. If someone has it, is it public comment next? Does someone have it?
Public comment.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, is that you, Lynn? Yeah, yeah, you're cutting in and out. Uh-oh. Okay, so is there any?
I'm sorry.
I'm going to text her to call.
Okay, is there any public comment? If you could help scan this, if there's any public comment, that would be helpful. I can't. Okay, I see one coming from Kristen Turcos. Okay, so does someone have the blurb about public comment that they can read? I'm sorry, I don't.
Sure.
Thank you, Megan.
Can you hear me now, please?
Hi, Lynn. I think so, but it does keep cutting out.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Lynn, we can kind of hear you. It cuts in and out.
The board welcomes.
Lynn, would you like
I'm
me
going to sign out and come right back in.
Okay.
So we have public comment. So Megan, if you don't mind reading the
The board welcomes public participation. We ask that speakers please limit their comments to 3 minutes. Please be aware that the board will not respond to any comments made during the public comment period, except to clarify issues. But we will take into consideration your comments, and when appropriate, district administration will follow up with you at a later point in time. Thanks.
Can I interrupt for a moment? Marcia, is it possible for you to mute because I see some noise coming in from your speaker? Thank you.
Would you like me to time Joyce as I normally do?
Okay, great. Kristen, whenever you're ready.
Okay, sorry, I have a fidgety baby. I'm Kristen Turkos. I live at 14 Bear Hill Road, and I'm just commenting on behalf of my husband, James, and myself, and we had a whole bunch of other people sign a letter that we also submitted to the board. We first wanted to express our gratitude to the Board of Education and the entire staff at Beecher Road School for a safe and successful school opening this year. The teachers and staff have truly gone above and beyond their call of duty. Our children have already made valuable connections with teachers and staff members and formed new friendships, and they are thriving in school. It would be in the best interest of our children to remain at Beecher Road School and continue with full-time in-person learning for the duration of the school year. While we recognize that cases of COVID-19 in Connecticut are on the rise, this increase cannot be attributed to students being in school. According to the World Health Organization, few outbreaks have been reported in schools. In the majority of cases reported in children, the virus was acquired at home and not from another student. There is also no evidence to show that the hybrid model puts students and staff at any less of a risk than full-time in-person learning. Studies have also shown that closing schools did less to reduce cases than other interventions like social distancing and hand washing. In any event, the COVID-19 safety guidelines implemented at Beecher have been highly effective, with only two positive cases this entire year that were swiftly identified and contained. The dedication of the faculty, administration, and students to the guidelines has been nothing short of impressive, and we would assume that there would continue to be strict adherence for the remainder of the year. More noteworthy than the lack of data attributing outbreaks to schools is the social emotional well-being of our children, especially those at the formative elementary school level. Our children need to stay in school with their peers. Any disruptions to their routines and instruction can and will affect their ability to learn, not to mention that the implications for their mental health from another school shutdown are yet to be determined. Remote learning would also place a burden on families with two working parents. The loss of one parent's income or having to pay for childcare would make it much more difficult for parents to provide for their children. Recently, the State Education Commissioner and the Acting Public Health Commissioner wrote a letter to superintendents stating, in-person education is too important for our children to disrupt their education further, unless and until local conditions dictate the need to do so. They also said that schools should not be closed preemptively. The decision to go hybrid or remote must be
30
driven
seconds.
from the Department of Public Health and not by fear in our community. Governor Lamont has been quoted as saying, I feel very strongly that if there's an opportunity for an in-school option, it's the best option for these kids. We strongly feel that it is the best option for our kids as well. Please do not shut the doors for full-time in-person learning again. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I also sent you sources for the statistics that I quoted. Thanks.
I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Lynn. Is there any other public comment?
Wonderful. Do we have any other public comment?
None seen in the chat.
I see Katerina Zdrowski, who has a public comment.
Thank you. I did raise my hand in the participants. I just want to point out that it is important to identify the names, whether they're TAs or teachers on that letter. There is a significance. We cannot work without our TAs. Without them, we couldn't do our jobs. They're very important. They're an intricate piece of teaching. Without them, we can't teach. But I think as far as I can see, I see 5 teachers on there. I think it is important to note that. Thank you.
Dan, do you see anybody else? Marcia, do you see anyone's hand raised?
You can also use the chat function in case we miss you.
I'm not seeing anyone.
I see none. I think you should move on.
Thank you. We're up to item 2 on the agenda, the consent agenda. Is there anything that the board wishes to extract from the consent agenda this evening?
I do. I wish to extract all 4 policies.
Okay, we'll be extracting all 4 policies from the consent agenda. Anything else? Okay, can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda with the extraction of the 4 policies?
Sorry, I'm confused. Why are we extracting the 4 policies?
Because I'd like to have discussion on them.
Okay,
So,
Joyce, are you making a motion?
yep, okay, I move to approve the consent to agenda as presented, extracting the 4 policies.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
I second.
Dan Cowan? Okay, board members, all in favor? I think, I can't see you all.
So can I ask a procedural question? So if we don't want to extract the policies, do we then not vote to approve?
Can we just clarify what a vote in favor or against would mean?
Exactly.
Christine, can you help me with that, or Marcia?
Because I actually wanted to move to approve the consent agenda as presented, not to extract the policy. So am I able to actually do that?
Marcia, should I be having a motion to extract the policies?
I guess I'm confused.
You can't pass the consent agenda as presented because Dan has requested extraction of that. That is a separate piece, but you would then vote on the consent agenda without inclusion of the policies.
Okay. So basically what we're voting for is the approval of the minutes of October 5th, October 19th, the financial report, the summary of the financial report, the detailed financial report, and the combining financial statements. So that's what we're voting on right now. So Laura? Yep. Megan?
Sorry, I guess I'm confused because those are not in the previous minutes, right? I mean, am I missing something here? Those are in our current today discussion. Those are not in our minutes from our previous meetings. So I don't see what we're even extracting.
We're approving the consent agenda, which includes the October 5th and October 19th meeting minutes, the summary financial report ending October 31st, the detailed financial report ending October 31st, the combining financial statements through October 31st. The policies have been extracted at the request of a board member. But the rest we need to approve.
Okay.
So are you voting in favor, Megan? Of the minutes and the finances?
Sure. Yes.
David? Jeff Hughes?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Mike Strambler?
Yes.
Jeff Townsend?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And I vote yes. It's a unanimous vote, Marcia. Okay, so now the policies, we will, and you can correct me, Marcia, if I'm wrong on this. Will we move that to the report of the policy committee?
That's correct.
Thank you.
And I think to clarify Megan's question is that when the policy committee submits policies to be reviewed, they automatically go on the consent agenda like every time, unless someone extracts them. That way we can quickly move through policies normally, because most times policies just get approved.
Dan, policies for 30-day review go under consent agenda. Policies for adoption always go under policy committee, and they're done independent.
Thank you, Marcia. Okay, moving on.
But so essentially we said we're not putting it up for 30-day review, but we'll discuss it at the section of the policy. And then if we decide at that point, we then have to put it on for 30-day review. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Item 3, reports. PTO, Joy.
Good evening, everyone. The PTO has had a busy start of the year. Picture days happened successfully outdoors this year. Retakes are scheduled to take place this Thursday from 10 to 1 in the South Assembly. We had our first ever virtual hoot, and it was a tremendous success thanks to all the hard work of our hoot coordinator, Rushi Jain, and her dedicated team. It kicked off on October 24th with a jack-o'-lantern parade and hoot drive-through at the school, which included some spooky, silly, and special Halloween scenes with teachers, staff, and community members. We were able to collect over $1,300 in cash donations from over 200 cars that came through. There was a silent auction from 10:24 to 10:29, which featured gift baskets, gift cards, and all kinds of goodies. This incredible effort raised over $5,000. And there was also a whole week of virtual activities, which included Spooky Story Night, Halloween Craft Night, the return of the Pocket Lady, Madame Clairvoyant, Professor Proton, and even a virtual dance party. I really want to give a special thank you to Rushi and everyone who worked so hard to make this possible. Our first ever online Scholastic Book Fair kicked off today and will run through November 29th. Families will have the option to shop for book fair exclusives directly from the interactive book list and enjoy special online shopping features with over 6,000 items, including new releases, bestsellers, and value packs. All orders are going to ship directly to the home with free shipping on book orders over $25. And all purchases support our school, and we earn 25% in rewards. To continue our tradition of providing Thanksgiving food baskets this year, the PTO has organized a collection and will be purchasing grocery store gift cards for the families in our community. People can contribute by donating on the Beecher Road School PTO PayPal until November 23rd. We've been able to virtually host several authors this year for all of our students, both in person and remote. And we want to give a special thanks to Larissa Croco for making this happen. We are gathering new ideas to be together and build community this year. And we're going to start a virtual bulletin board on brs.ptboard.com to post things that are happening in our community. We're going to be creating a cookbook this year with delicious recipes from our Beecher community that will be published and sold as a fundraiser. We're going to have grade level socials as virtual game night after the holidays, and we're going to also have something new for the adults. Our hope is to build community among parents who can't otherwise get together in these times and to have some fun over the winter. Moms and dads can sign up to virtually host various classes that will include cooking, yoga, book clubs, trivia night, and all kinds of great stuff. We're looking forward to getting a chance to meet Dr. Budd and to discuss some great ideas we have for the new year. And we hope you all have a wonderful holiday.
Joy, thank you so much. You know, the creativity and ingenuity of the PTO always amazes me. You guys are incredible. And so really, on behalf of the board and the community, I want to extend my personal thanks and the thanks of all of those who benefit from the great things that PTO is doing. Thanks so much. 3.2, Superintendent's Report. Christine.
Thank you, Lynn. Good evening, everyone. So I just want to begin by providing a very brief update in regard to our COVID situation at Beecher Road School. Beecher Road School, as you are most likely aware, has had 2 cases. The 2 cases were not related to each other. One was shared with the community on Monday, November 9th. The second was shared last evening, November 15th. The first case, we needed to quarantine 6 staff members and 34 students. And the return to school date for the students and staff quarantined at that time is November 23rd, next Monday. For the second case, we had to quarantine 3 staff members and 20 students, and the return to school date would be November 30th. In this case, that return to school date is the start date of our week of all remote learning due to the Thanksgiving break and traveling and social gatherings, and at the advice of the health department, we are utilizing that week as an all remote week in order to establish a safe setting to hopefully return to full in-person learning on December 7th. We have begun the transition to having more of our teachers experience working with students both remotely and in person. As we have had to quarantine students, this has become something that we have had to engage in out of necessity to provide an appropriate educational environment for our students during that period of quarantine. Parents have been very understanding and supportive as administration has reached out to them to share that their child will need to quarantine. So what is happening is previously many of our special education teachers had been working with in-person and remote students, but now I'm very proud of our teachers because I know this is extremely hard work. But if there is a student who has to quarantine from their class, then they stay with that particular teacher. We're not moving them to the remote learning classes for that period of time, nor are we expecting that the student is going to complete solely a packet of work for that period of the quarantine. But instead, we have asked that the students be invited to participate in the morning meetings, that they have an opportunity to participate in some of the mini lessons that occur, that the teachers do periodic check-ins with the students to keep them connected with the in-class learning that's going on. In the case where we've had to quarantine an entire classroom, then that teacher is teaching that class remotely during the period of quarantine. So this is a new experience for each teacher, and it's slowly developing and unrolling. And it's our plan to assign the students soon to the current remote classes that we had talked about. So our remote learning classes, which are currently large, we plan to, as we've spoken about before, reduce that class size to 25. And we have reached out and had a teacher at each grade level indicate that they would be the teacher who would be the remote and in-person learning teacher at that particular grade level. So we have a situation unrolling that we will have a teacher who is going to be taking on the extra students from the remote learning class, as well as we have many teachers who are providing the opportunity for in-person and remote learning with students who are in quarantine. So I just wanted to update the board on our remote learning class sizes. I am in a position where I'm ready to now reach out to the parents in those remote learning classes to see if there are any parents who are interested in having their child move to the in-person remote learning teacher as of the start of the second trimester, which would be December 7th. That new section teacher would be working with both in-person and remote students, as we have discussed. At each grade level where there is a need, we have identified the teacher. So in grade 3, we would have 2 teachers doing that, and then we would have 1 teacher in grade 2, 1 teacher in grade 4, 1 teacher in grade 5, and 1 teacher in grade 6. Based on the current numbers, we do not plan to move any of the students out of K and or out of 1. In addition, we will be informing the parents, as I said, that moving forward, any requests for a shift from current remote in-person learning to remote learning, those students will stay with their current teacher. We will not be moving them into the already large remote learning classes. So from this point forward, December 7th forward, the remote learning class sizes will not increase, and they haven't increased, quite honestly, for quite some time now, and they will actually have a potential to be reduced if any additional students were to indicate they wanted to move from remote learning back to in-person learning. We will continue to provide the remote learning teachers with coaching support and with TA support. We would like to increase the current level of TA support. However, that remains a work in progress. I am continuing to have conversations with the WEA in what that potentially could look like. At one point, they were hoping that we could add an additional TA position. I have brought that forward to the board previously, and there really is no funding in the budget in order to add an additional TA. So depending on my continued conversations with the WEA, there is a potential that we may reassign and add 1 additional TA to the current TA support that they're receiving. But again, that's not finalized at this time. At the, I'm sorry, I lost my place here. At our last meeting, the Board of Ed suggested some questions for me to ask at the upcoming meeting that had participation from the Connecticut Public Health Department. The questions will be submitted for the meeting that is being held tomorrow morning. I was able to ask 1 question at the Red Alert Dialogue last Thursday, in which Tom St. Louis from the Public Health Department attended. I stated that, and I kind of paraphrased the conversation that occurred last week at the Board of Education meeting, that the Woodbridge Board of Education would like to know exactly what criteria, cases per 100,000 per day, infection rate, would be used to shift to a new learning model. Currently, the advice from our local health department is to stay in-person learning. Infection rates are increasing. The community is in the red, although it later then shifted to orange, but as we know, it could just as potentially move back to red this Thursday. We have been advised, as there is little to no spread in the schools, that we can stay in the in-person learning. This makes the Board of Education wonder if we are then waiting for school spread, and they are very uncomfortable with that, putting staff and students in danger. The response that was provided to me after I summarized that was that they once again stated that the public health department feels that schools are the safest places for our students, that you will see more cases in schools in the weeks ahead. That spread, however, is not in the schools. He stated that there may be administrative reasons to do a new model or to move to a different model, however, not due to spread. Stated that it is not anticipated that there would be more spread in schools than in the community, as schools have layers of mitigation factors in place. So he felt that while spread within the community may be on the rise, that he still did not feel that there would be spread within the schools themselves. He stated it is a risk tolerance issue, and he also stated that there is not a magic number to shut schools down. My takeaway from that conversation was that the state is not going to and does not want schools to move to all remote learning. They are frustrated by some of the prolonged closures that they are seeing. For me, keeping our school open to in-person learning is about the social emotional well-being of our students. And for the state, I think it is that they, at this point, want it to be a local-based decision. What has changed on the state's stance from last spring to now is that in the spring, they were very concerned and did not know a lot about COVID and felt that it may spread very similar to the flu, and therefore were concerned that children being in school would be spreading COVID. However, they currently do not feel that children are as likely to spread COVID. In my most recent conversation with QVHD and OHD, the two local health departments, about a change in the learning model, it was suggested that if we move to a different model at some point, then transitioning back to the more in-person learning model should be looking at the data from 2 weeks prior and getting back to that level along with other indicators going down as well. So for example, if Beecher Road School was in full in-person at 15.4, and then decided to move to hybrid or remote at 30 cases per 100,000 population in Woodbridge, then the transition back would be the 15.4, or other data points also trending down. I am not offering up those numbers as the numbers. I'm just sharing the suggestion that to move back to more in-person learning, we would look at data from 2 weeks previous when we were in in-person learning. And the other piece is, in addition, in support, the move to a hybrid versus all remote. I had talked to them about how, that's not a very popular model currently in Woodbridge, that many people are not in favor of us at all ever moving to hybrid and would actually prefer that if we had to move away from full in-person learning, that we move to all remote. The response from the health department was that they see hybrid as an opportunity to continue to provide students contact with their peers and teachers, and that it's about the emotional well-being of the student. So it's a genuine concern for them for a school to consider going all remote for any extended duration of time. So that's what I have. I'm sure that you have questions. In addition to that, I also have, before I move on to the calendar, which I won't do until after you ask me questions, I do have an update in regard to the remote learning coach at some point, if you would like me to give a brief summary of that as well.
Why don't you do that now, and then we'll have questions
Okay.
about the whole report on the COVID status and remote and in-person learning, Christine.
Okay. So at this point in time, Margaret, the coach working with our remote learning teachers, has had the opportunity to meet with them all as a full group. And then she has spent the last 2 weeks having individual meetings with the teachers. As of currently, by the end of this week, she will have met with 6 of the teachers twice, all of the teachers at least once, and several of the teachers 3 times. And she will continue to reach out to them to schedule times to meet with them weekly. And if they want to meet more frequently during the week, then she has time available to do that as well. The initial meeting focuses on relationship building. It's very important for her as a coach to develop relationships with the remote learning teachers. And she's trying to, through that conversation with the teachers, gain an understanding of what their current status is. So she listened to the conversations with the teachers, and she tried to make categories in regard to what their concerns are. And the categories were they had kind of general concerns, they have curriculum and material concerns, student engagement, support and collaboration, scheduling, technology, home communication, communication with administration, and questions for administration. So as she listened through all the different things, she kind of categorized whatever individuals were saying into those different categories along the way. In subsequent meetings, the plan will be for the teachers to visualize success. So if I were to be successful as a remote learning teacher, what does that look like? And then from there to identify their strengths and their areas where they need maybe possible areas for growth. And then to set and establish some goals in regard to a focus on teaching and learning. So one goal related towards the actual teaching and learning, as well as a goal that would be on their personal well-being. I have shared with the board before that this is a very strong concern of ours, in that, you know, we need to help them to focus their time management, to help them with stress management, and help them find effective ways to maybe reduce some of the strategies and stress along the way. So they will then create action steps and strategies so that they can measure their progress moving forward. And she will share research and resources to support the teacher's individual needs. She is also meeting with the administrative team once a week so that she can get answers to some of the questions that the teachers have and help to find some solutions in regard to whether it be resources or technology or supplies, and kind of be the liaison in between in those 2 areas. So that's where we currently are. I do want to reiterate again that she's been coaching for 2 weeks. We have her coaching for a minimum of 8 weeks with our teachers. So hopefully with the next time that there's a report out, there'll be more information to share with the Board of Education.
Thank you, Christine. Laura, do you have any questions for Christine?
I just want to say that I agree with what the doctor had mentioned, that the hybrid model is an important component in order to maintain contact and provide social emotional learning for the children. And so I think it's an important model, even though some people don't agree or don't want to use it, but I believe that it is an important model.
Thank you, Laura. Megan, do you have any questions for Christine this evening?
Thank you, Christine. I really appreciate all your work on all these things and keeping in contact with the various different departments and individuals across all these different layers. I'm still kind of formulating some of my thoughts, so I don't know, maybe I'll come back around to me. But I guess one thing I had off the top of my head was Right now, I believe the coach is just working with distance learning teachers who are doing it now. I think you said that we have a plan at some point where they will work with all the teachers, or has that started already to help prepare all teachers for distance learning?
So that has not begun yet, Megan. So what I would hope the next layer would be those teachers who will be potentially taking on some of our current remote students to reduce the class sizes. So that would be my next level of teachers that I would have her interact with. And then I think on a broader level, at some point, we would want her to provide some professional learning to all staff, because potentially at any point in time, all staff are going to be doing in-person and remote learning. So it can expand and it can grow.
Thank you. I think one thing, maybe it's more of a acknowledgement at this point that it feels that administration is really trying to take in all this information and make decisions, and trying to be careful not to make fear-based decisions. And I think it is really tricky in a pandemic. But I think it's showing that we've had 2 cases totally unrelated. As far as we can tell, neither one of those has spread to anyone else, which is showing that it's not creating outbreaks as being told to us in other parts of the state as well, in many other towns. So I guess keeping that in mind and commending our administration and our teachers and everyone for putting themselves out there every day and trying to make the best of the situation and giving our kids everything that they're giving them every day. You know, we have, I don't know, 70 or 80%, I keep seeing different numbers now, so I'm a little unclear on that, of our students are in person. And it sounds like our mitigation strategies are working, at least at Woodbridge, and it does sound like in other places as well. So thank you all for everything that you're doing, and commend you for continuing to do it.
Thank you, Megan. David Ross? Comments or questions? David, do you have comments or questions?
I can see he's moving, but he's not unmuting.
Thank you, Christine, for the detailed. Thank you for the detailed. Can you not hear me? Hello? Can you hear me or no?
Yes, we can hear you, Dave.
Can hear you, Dave.
You can hear me. Okay. Christine, thank you. I appreciate the detailed update. I don't have anything to add or contribute at this point.
Jeff Hughes?
Thank you very much, Christine. Appreciate you being in full, engagement with the health district and all your resources. That's much appreciated. I like to echo Laura. I think as much as we can, embrace the social emotional learning of our students, we do so. I know there's also the impact of careers and family life as well. So thank you for considering that. And I appreciate all your efforts into it.
Joyce?
Yes, I had a few questions. The first point that I wanted to make is that I will continue to press for criteria that is clear and transparent, so that we understand what would we be looking at to decide when and if we move to a more restrictive educational model. I appreciate the letters that we have received from parents saying that their kids are safe, that they feel that their children are safe. And I think that is a testament to the enormous efforts by the administration, the teachers, and the staff. Having said that, I think that as a board, we have to think about the community at large. And within that community, we have adults within and outside the walls of Beecher Road School. And as we know, the adults in the building did not have a choice, do not have a choice as to whether they come into the building or not, unlike the families. And as we know, adults are more vulnerable to COVID as well. So I am not advocating that we move in any direction. All I am trying to do is seek clarity and transparency around how we're going to be making these decisions about when we would move to a safer educational model. The second point I want to make is, first of all, Christine, thank you for responding to the question I had about students that are individually quarantined. And so you have families that are making good choices by keeping their children home safely. And this is not a situation where you have whole classes quarantined. This is a situation where within the community, there has been exposure. And so, Christine, you shared with us the efforts that are out there to support the families that are making these very difficult decisions, but are doing the right thing for our community. And so we want to, I think it'd be worthwhile if you shared with everyone who is dialing in to let them know that they will be supported if they have a child that has been exposed to COVID. I think that's really important because we want to encourage people to make these good choices. So if you don't mind just sharing what you had shared with us, I think that'd be very good. The third question I have is with respect to the remote learning families, where you're going to be asking whether there are any volunteers who would be willing to move from the remote classes to the blended learning classes. And if you do not have enough volunteers, I understand that you will assign based on what you feel is in the best interest of the student. But is there any room for families to disagree and say, no, I do not want to move? So how would you handle that situation? If you could speak to that, that would be great. And thank you for that update on the remote learning expert. That was very helpful. And I think that in the coming weeks, as we learn more about the conversations that are taking place, and I think it'd be very interesting to hear the remote learning experts' assessment as to how we're doing, what could we be doing to better support our remote learning teachers, whether that be through technology, whether that be through support, manpower support, whether that be through other resources. So if over the next few weeks you have the opportunity to kind of suss that out, that would be very helpful. Thanks.
Okay, so I jotted a few notes down. If I missed something, please then bring me back. So I just want to, going back to, I know that you're looking for criteria. I just want to remind you that tomorrow morning, it is my hope that I'm going to be able to share the question that Jeff Townsend put together for the Board of Ed, as well as Dan had a question as well. So I hope that I will have feedback for the board on those particular questions after the meeting tomorrow morning with the Public Health Department and the Connecticut State Department of Education. In regard to how I'm currently making the decisions, as you know, and I know that you're aware, I do that based on guidance from the health department. We have regular conversations together, and that is how I've been making the decision moving forward thus far. In regard to the remote learning and students not wanting to move, I would really like to have this opportunity to reach out to parents and see if there's anyone interested before, we still have some time before December 7th. So I'd really like to see just what I get before I make a definitive decision about how we might then find other students without forcing people to move. Joyce, I understand that is a concern. And if I had to establish with administration what criteria we would utilize, I'd like first to have the opportunity to do that outreach to the parents and see what comes of that before I make a decision about that next step. So I will certainly include the board prior to that next step happening. But I'm just informing the board this evening of my intention to send a letter out sometime this week to the parents of the remote learning classes to see if there are any who would be interested in moving to the in-person remote teacher. And then in regard to sharing the information that I had shared with you as a board, it's not that I don't remember everything I share with you, but I hope that I'm able to remember what it is. And if not, maybe you could share what I had shared. But basically, when we have students who we have to quarantine, it's very important to us that they be still included in their classroom setting. So I agree with Joyce that it's extremely important that if your child, beyond us as the school quarantining your child, feels there's a reason why your child needs to be quarantined, that you're aware that your child has had a close contact, that you has been a close contact with a COVID case, that you reach out and have a conversation with our nursing staff. They're outstanding. They will support you through the process. And we will certainly make sure that we are providing an educational opportunity for your child during that time. I just want to echo that I think our parents and our families have been doing an outstanding job in following the protocols that we've established. And that's why we are where we are, and we are currently still in in-person learning, because all of those protocols are being followed. And I thank them for that. So Joyce, I don't know if there's anything else or anything I missed.
Oh, it was just about the remote learning teachers. After the expert has had a bit more time to work with the team to help us understand how we could better support the remote teachers, whether that be through technology, manpower, other resources, whatever it is, just in due time.
Yeah, so, and I'm sure that she will absolutely share that with us, and it might actually be at that point Dr. Budd who will be moving forward with that conversation with the board and what's happening with remote learning. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Christine. Mike, do you have anything this evening?
Yes, I just have I have one. Most of my other questions got answered. So first of all, I just want to thank you, Christine, as well. You've been doing a great job in keeping our community safe, and want to thank the administrators as well for playing their part in doing that. So my question is kind of comes back to this the criteria, having a clear criteria, and I understand that you're going to be hopefully getting some answers tomorrow. It sounds like, based on your summary of that presentation, where we're at and where the health department is having communities make their own decisions about whether they need to change a model based on information regarding their specific communities. And so I guess I'm just wondering if there's more of the same of that response tomorrow, and it basically comes down to us making our own decision and our own criteria for changing a model. I'm just wondering, Christine, if you have any thoughts about what the criteria ought to be for us.
So, Mike, I really don't have a number in mind, because, as I said, what I'm doing is each week when we receive the current numbers, I have those conversations with the health department, and we also take a look at whether and what is going on within our schools. Now, when we've had those conversations, there had not been 2 cases at Beecher Road School. So, this week there had been 1. Next time we have this conversation, when the new numbers are released, there will have been 2. So, they are looking at that as well when we have those conversations. I think the important thing is that if there is a dramatic shift in the numbers that are released, so let's say this Thursday the number is dramatically different than what it has been up until this point, I think the thing that we need to remember is that we can all come together and have a meeting to discuss that. And I think it would be important for us to come together and have that discussion. And whether it be in the next 3 weeks or whether it be beyond that, I think it's important for us to continue to have these conversations. So I would be looking to that, Mike, that if there was something, a dramatic shift, and if the health department was still not indicating a need for a shift in regard to the learning model, that we have a conversation about why the health department is not recommending that at that time, and even invite them to come back to another meeting to join in on the conversation.
Okay. Thank you. And when you're referring to shifts, are you referring to say cases in the community or cases within the school itself?
So I'm really talking, the first number that I'm talking about is that number that is shared every Thursday, which is the cases per 100,000 in the community, which, last week was 15.4 for Woodbridge. It put Woodbridge as a town in the red zone. For instructional model, it was still in orange. However, this week we went to 12.2. So the town went back to orange as well, and we've stayed in in-person learning mode. But let's say that, this week, and I don't want to jinx anything or come up with anything, let's say that number was 15 to 20 points higher than it has been previously. I think a very different conversation is going to occur when in our local community that number increases. I think another piece that you indicated is, what if we suddenly have more and more cases at Beecher Road School, even though it's not spread within Beecher Road School? That's still an impact to our learning community, and I think we still need to take a look at what we might do differently moving forward, whether it be that we have to consider a movement to hybrid or whether we have to move to all remote for a period of time. So just by staying in this model right now does not necessarily mean that the district is going to stay in this model forever, but I do think it's important for us to try to stay in some kind of in-person learning for as long as we can and keep our community of learners and staff safe.
Yeah, and I just want to state that I'm in full agreement with that I want us to stay in person as long as we can stay in person and to have as much in-person instruction as possible. I also think that it will be, I think it will be important for us to have clearer criteria than we do now. Especially if one of our leading indicators seem to be the case based on your conversation and based on the information received last time. One of the leading indicators is whether we have widespread an outbreak or not within the school. I think we should have some kind of criteria around, what is the number of cases we're willing to accept within our school before we change models.
I agree with that, Mike, and we'll continue to try to flesh that out. And I can also ask that question this week when I meet with the local health departments. So beyond the number, it's also the impact in regard to the number of students or staff that need to be quarantined that also come into play with that, and whether or not the cases overlap each other. So for example, if we had one case in September and now we had one case in November, they were separated by enough that the quarantines weren't overlapping each other. We're in a current position this week where both of the groups that are quarantining are overlapping each other by a full week, and that causes for some issues within the building. in regard to staffing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Christine. People keep moving on my screen. Jeff Townsend.
All right. Thank you, Christine, for that really detailed and helpful update about the meeting. And it sounds like I just want to thank you for channeling our concerns very clearly, I think, in the question that you did ask, even to the extent that we may not have provided specific questions before. And I'm glad that the next question, the question I formulated will be asked tomorrow. I'll be really looking forward to the response to it. Like Mike, I'm still concerned that there isn't a clear statement of what bound we're going to head to think about more restrictive models, only because there's always the possibility in these kinds of circumstances that one sort of slowly shifts the line until one gets far beyond where one really wants to be. So it's important for us to, and I completely understand if there is a dramatic shift, that tends to create a situation where people feel alarmed and worried, and it should. But I think we should also be concerned about a slow and gradual shift and the problems that may ensue as we slowly and gradually shift to, unfortunately, what looks like more and more cases at the school and in the community. So again, thank you for that detailed update and for all the work you're doing. I want to thank, as usual, the hard work of our administration and staff and in-person teachers for what they've done. I do think they've done a fantastic job of maintaining the mitigation protocols, and that's really, really important. And then I also want to thank the remote teachers who are struggling with a difficult task now, and the parents who have actually had their kids in remote, because that's what's enabling us to do the social distancing that we have in the school right now. So they deserve our thanks for what they're investing in their own children and in everyone else's children by making this all possible. The questions that I have, as I said, I'm looking forward to the further information from the remote learning with regard to the questions we stated before tomorrow. So thanks for asking that question. Concerns with regard to the spread in schools and the potential for us having some sort of criterion beyond spread in schools for making a shift to a new learning environment. With regard to the concern with the learning, I want to just understand a fine point a little bit that Joyce mentioned, which is I understood you describing that the remote learning expert we brought on board had categorized their responses in various categories. And I realized that this may be sort of coming later, but I just was trying to understand, is that information that has already been gathered and could be shared with the board, or is that information that will be shared at a later time, that specific information that you talked about with regard to where the concerns of remote learning teachers are currently right now?
I don't have anything in more detail to share at this point. What she shared with me was that as she was listening to the teachers, those were the categories that she was currently placing their concerns and comments under. And then we'll be looking to establish and set up ways for us to begin to address anything that fell under those different categories. So I don't have anything detailed right now that I can share with you. But certainly I hope moving forward that we'll be able to dig a little deeper into what that is. Okay,
I would just ask that, as I think a considerable number of the board members are concerned about this particular aspect of about a quarter of our students learning at the school, that as quickly as we can get that data back to the board, I would really appreciate it. I understand that it should be fully considered and thoughtfully analyzed by her before it comes to us. But I just, as soon as it is in a ready form that we could digest it in a well-processed way, I'd really appreciate it being brought to the attention of the board.
Okay, thank you.
And then I guess my other question is just this, and it relates directly to that. The board has expressed on a number of occasions concerns about the relative perception of parents versus in remote learning situation compared to in-person situation. Do you feel that bringing the remote learning expert in? I know they've just started, but and considering this additional TA perhaps change as well, are we feeling like those changes are addressing the problems of the remote learning? Do we need to be thinking about additional changes at this point? What is your overall perception of how we've addressed those concerns at this moment?
So one other aspect that I think when we can't immediately solve an issue for individuals, such as I have not been able to immediately resolve the class sizes in the remote learning classes to help those remote learning teachers, left to their own devices, they are working very hard and they are finding some solutions within their own work in order to better handle this. And one example that I'll give you, and that we continue to have conversations with, as I said, when I meet with the WEA and have conversations, is the connection that they still have with their in-person colleagues and what their in-person colleagues are doing in order to support and help them within their remote learning class setting. So they're working together, they're trying to find ways to help each other, whether it be from a curriculum standpoint, whether it be bringing their kids together for an instructional unit, and many different ways along that. So I think as that begins to expand as well, Jeff, and some of the other grade levels are able to also begin to offer those opportunities, it's been frustrating on my part. I'm going to be very honest in not being able to resolve this in a very quick and timely manner, but it's been extremely heartwarming and encouraging to see what the teachers are doing because of their dedication to their students and working together as colleagues. So hopefully soon we'll also have more information that we'll be able to share with you in regard to what those different things are that the grade level teams are doing working together.
That's wonderful to hear. And I just want to comment that I'm in a capacity on the board, and I won't direct it exactly where, but I think that one of the pieces of feedback that I've heard from various individuals who've been involved in remote education across the state is that they have found that one of the things that really helps the remote education of the students is having it integrated with conversations that they can have with other in-person learning students at the same time, ways to integrate those classrooms with the other classrooms. So I just want to really encourage exactly what you just described as one way that we can move to help the social and emotional learning of not only the remote students, but also the in-person students who through that means can, be face-to-face literally with a remote student in certain situations if we can set it up. It's a way to alleviate some of the strong cohorting we've had to do in the in-person setting to actually involve some of the remote person learnings and have some of these inter-class interactions. So I just want to really encourage that as we look forward to additional ways to make our remote learning better, but also at the same time, hopefully help the in-person community as well. And that's all that I have to come.
Thank you, Jeff. Dan, comments or questions this evening?
Yeah. So I actually wanted to thank Christine for giving us all the updates. And I just want to address one comment. I forget which one of my fellow board members said that, transition to a safer educational model. And I just wanted to say that that was a fact, that was stated as a fact, but it's actually just an opinion and is actually opposed to the expert opinion of the QVHD and the State Department of Education as well. So I just wanted to address that one fact there. I also say that I really do support clear and transparent metrics as well for our transition. And I think it's vital that we have clear and transparent metrics for transitioning out and transitioning back in. So I would like to let my other board members know that you'll have my full support for a clear and transparent metric out of the school, as long as we set a clear and transparent metric to enter back into the school at the same time. I liked Christine's idea a lot and fully support it, possibly having a meeting or possibly using the metrics to trigger a meeting. And so, I would actually propose maybe November 27th that we readdress this issue again. It might make everyone feel a little bit better to know that we have a meeting on the horizon scheduled to look at this. That'll be, maybe that's the wrong date. I'm talking about the following Friday, not the 27th, the following Friday, after we've done the remote learning for a week. But maybe the Thursday night we'll have new numbers and we'll be able to evaluate what's going on better that day. So let me pull that date out from my calendar quick. The 4th. So, or the 3rd, something around there. And having it on the calendar might make us all feel better. And then finally, I think that the hard part the reason that we're really struggling to set clear and concise, transparent metrics right now is that we're in unprecedented times. Previously, looking at the ratio of infections over severe diseases in the states of Florida, New York, and Connecticut, we were at like a number of 61, 10, and 9 as a ratio, with the lower the number, the worse being. So like if you were 1, it means that 1 out of every case results in severe death. If you take the numbers today, we're at 140 in Connecticut, this is infections divided by severe cases. So 140 in Connecticut, 91 in Florida, and 229 in New York. So if you look at those metrics, we're 22, 10, and 14 times less severe than we were previously. So it makes it hard for us to have clear and transparent metrics when the case is not the same, right? It's just a totally different time than it was then. And I think we need to take that into consideration. Finally, the last point is I was so overjoyed to hear the supporting and blending actions that the teachers are taking in supporting each other and supporting all the students. And I would like to really put out that if any additional technology, as we move deeper and deeper into a blended model, if there's any technology needed so that they can properly educate the children, document cameras, or any other kind of thing that would support the teachers doing their jobs better, I hope that the administration would bring to us any kind of recommendations for that, because I think that investments in infrastructure pay dividends over time. So that's it.
Thank you, Dan. I just want to comment and say that I really appreciate the administration and nursing staff's response to the 2 cases that we've had in the school. And I think the transparency and the sharing of information has really helped to make everyone feel better. So many thanks for the people who have been involved in that. And I know last night there were a lot of people scrambling, so your efforts are really appreciated. I also want to share my thanks for the staff's willingness to pull together and as well as their dedication. I find those things to be incredibly commendable. And so I thank the staff, teachers, the teacher assistants, and everyone else at the school, the custodians, the nursing staff, the cafeteria people who are all working so hard to make this all work for us. So thank you for that. Christine, are there any other board comments before we move on to the draft calendar? I don't see any hands. Okay, Christine, draft 2021-2022 calendar.
So what I have in front of the board this evening is a draft of the calendar for the following school year. This draft is based off of the traditional calendar that you've pretty much approved each year. It's also in alignment with BOA. There are some days that are slightly different, and that has to do with things within contract language. So for example, in Woodbridge, the day before Thanksgiving is an in-service professional learning early release day for staff and no students. However, in Orange and in Bethany, they do have students on that particular day. So there are some slight variations. The board is not going to vote on this calendar this evening. I'm giving it to you today so that you have a month to review it. The board would vote on it next month and make a decision if there were any things that you wanted to change. In that time in between, if you have any questions specific to the calendar, if you would send them to me, I'd be more than happy to respond to those. And I've also provided this calendar to the WEA so that they can also review it over the course of the next few weeks and provide any feedback should they have any questions or concerns about the calendar as it currently stands. So it's really just there for you to begin to look at and peruse, and we will revisit it at the December Board of Education meeting for a vote in action.
Thank you, Christine. Next is Beach Road School report. Lisa.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here with all of you. It's nice to see you all on my screen again. Just a few quick updates. I also want to go all the way back to Halloween and just share with you how joyous it was. Our remote teachers some of them held a beep and greet and dressed up in costumes and had the students drive through in costumes and passed out some fun little goodie bags. I know some of the other remote teachers hosted costume reveals, which was a lot of fun for the students. And our in-person teachers made the day fun. The kids were allowed to dress up. There was crafts and activities going on. And I think that everyone really pulled together to try to make the day a little bit fun and a little bit different for the kids, considering Halloween looked so incredibly different this year. Moving on to our professional development day that we had on Election Day. We started our day with some wellness activities, optional, always optional, and a lot of different choices for our staff members to pick from. And then we had some really, really great conversations around hybrid learning and gave the teachers some time just to work as a PLC on that model. And we had a follow-up actually at a recent faculty meeting and ended up doing a little jigsaw work where we sent grade level representatives to the tech department and was able to ask some really specific questions and get some good feedback and answers to some of the work that they're wrestling with as they move forward with this teaching and learning style. And on the PD day, they spent some of the time also learning about the teacher evaluation system, which this year looks a little bit different than in previous years. Board members, I did share with you our virtual Veterans Day assembly. I hope you had the opportunity to view it, and that assembly was actually live streamed. We were able, with many, many thanks to our tech department, James Crawford, Jeannie Tarliglio, and Wendy Glenn, we were able to put a newly purchased and installed camera to use. So we were live streaming that event to all of our students in person and remote. So it was kind of a nice way for our whole community to be together briefly. The keynote speaker was my father. He very kindly agreed to do that just a day or two before that assembly. So we were very grateful to hear from him. And two last things. Joy actually already mentioned them, but I'm going to put my plug in. Actually, I don't know if she mentioned this one, but there is a town-wide event coming up. Our diversity committee, along with the town ad hoc committee, is leading a Building a Diverse Family Library event. It is a virtual event happening this Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. and registration is required. There's going to be panelists from a few different places, from some bookstores. I will be a panelist, and it is facilitated by our very own Tahara Parvez, who is a Beecher Road School parent and a member of our diversity committee and on the town ad hoc committee. So we hope you can join us for that. And the very last thing, Joy definitely mentioned this one, but I'm going to put my own little plug in, is the Scholastic Book Fair. It is happening. It kicked off this week. I hope that you are able to explore all of the very great titles and purchase some books for our students. I will say the PTO is incredibly generous. They often use points and funds that they get from that book fair to fund some of our teacher mini grants or to provide teachers more books and resources for their classroom libraries. So any shopping that you can do directly benefits both our teachers and our students. So I really encourage you to check out that Scholastic Book Fair. That's it for me, unless anyone has any questions. No? Okay.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa? I just want to encourage any board member who hasn't had an opportunity to watch the virtual Veterans Day program that Lisa sent the link to. It's really so nicely done. Kudos to you, Lisa, and especially to your dad, who really was an educator about Veterans Day in his little presentation. So please extend our thanks to him for participating as well.
In addition to having lots of grandkids, he's been hanging around me for a really long time. I think he learned a thing or two about talking to children.
He did a great job. So thanks for that, Lisa, and for the great work you're doing. Appreciate it. Next on the agenda is upcoming meeting presentations. The 2021-2022 budget proposal will most probably be on the agenda as a presentation in January, but we're asking board members now to be thinking if there's something that you think should be included in that presentation. It would be really helpful for the Finance Committee and for Al and Christine and Jonathan, who will be working on the budget, to get that information early on. Joyce.
Yes, given that we are likely to be still in a COVID world next year, I think a large part of the budget will be driven by the educational model that we decide we want in place in the fall. And as we have talked about, we need a model that balances equity, resources, safety, but we also cannot be hiring additional teachers. So I know Christine has done a lot of thinking around this, had to kind of live through the fallout effect of the reopening plan. So I'm sure she has a lot of great ideas. But I just want to say that the educational model is something that we'll have to really spend time thinking through, talking about in conjunction with the budget, because it's a big part of where we end up with the budget.
Thank you, Joyce. So I'm going to just ask any board members if you have any thoughts about the budget presentation, if you would email them to me or Christine or Al, that would be, or Joyce, that would be really helpful, because we'll discuss that at our next Finance Committee meeting. We'll give you an opportunity again at the December board meeting to add anything else that you might want to see in presentation, and then we'll plan for that presentation in January. Thank you. 3.4 on the agenda is Facilities Committee report. I want to just take a minute to thank Dan Cowan for stepping in to chair Friday's Facilities Committee meeting in the absence of the chair, Jeff Hughes. So Dan, I'm going to ask you if you have a report on facilities for this evening.
I do. So we have several completed projects from the last few months. First and foremost, we want to report out that there was a third water bottle filling station that was installed outside the North Gym, and that was provided by the PTO. So big thanks to the PTO for providing the station, and good job to the custodial staff for installing it. Also, some improvements were made to the PA loud system. It was identified that a power supply was not providing enough power to the speakers, causing some problems. We were able to resolve that as well by upgrading that power supply and actually adding several new speakers so that we have better coverage for our system. The MERV 13 filters continue to be installed throughout the school and being replaced. Several LED lights from the 2014 renovation has stopped working, and so I just want to take this moment to notify the town that that was a joint project between the town and ourselves, and that we are working to try to get them under warranty. And so some assistance from the town. I'm sure they're aware of it already, but I figured I'd mention it. Also, there was a mixing valve, which is used for the safety anti-scald protection, that failed in the boiler room, causing cold water to be produced. And that has been replaced. And now we have nice, safe hand washing water for the entire school. And we thought we were going to have a large problem with our piping system. However, when the pipes went from cold to warm, they started to leak, but the leak resolved itself. So we'll be planning for the next time that we change the temperature of those pipes to be prepared to make a repair instead of having to do an emergency repair. And finally, 3 issues that we'd like to mention that are outstanding that should be addressed is that we persistently have roof issues on the kindergarten wing, and that's an important financial item to bring up to the town, and that we have a goal of moving ever more of our infrastructure to the microturbine to safely make sure that we have backup power for all the critical infrastructure in the school, and adding additional key card readers and possibly upgrading our telephone lines would also be wonderful things to do in our long-term goals that the facility committee has. So that is the end of the report.
Thank you, Dan. I would like to also comment that Dr. Budd joined us at the Friday early morning facilities committee meeting, and certainly that's an indication of his willingness to have his feet on the ground and be running already. So thank you, Jonathan, for that. We appreciate it. 3.4.1, town request to use Beecher Road School as a shelter. Maybe Al, you could provide some background information for the board?
We can't hear you, Al.
Al, we can't hear you. Try again.
I can't hear Al. Can anyone else hear him?
No.
Al, you look like you're muted. Oh, now you're not muted.
No, he was not
But
muted before.
we still can't hear you.
Al, it's that extra fancy thing you're talking about. I'll come back to you for a minute.
Circle back. Okay.
Okay, let me try to do this. See how I do with it. The request was from the town of Woodbridge. The town of Woodbridge has requested the use of Beecher Road School as a designated emergency shelter during a disaster. And so in e-meeting, in your packets, you will find a proposal for an agreement between the town and the Board of Education. I believe that this has already gone to the Board of Selectmen. Al, you can just shake your head if that's correct.
It's correct, and I actually made a, there we go. Can you all hear me now? Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Basically, cut, paste, repeat everything Lynn just said. Indeed, was the perfect intro to it. And at their meeting last week, the Board of Selectmen authorized the first select woman to sign this agreement along with our Board of Ed chair. Basically, what this does is spell out the order of operations, how it would initiate using Beecher Road School as an alternate emergency shelter location. And again, first keyword there is alternate. The town is still going to continue to use Center School as its primary, but as Betsy Yagla and Jeanette Glicksman, who initially met with Vito Asparo and I, as they presented in that discussion, disaster events can often be largely undefined in both scope and duration. Sometimes we also have residents that don't immediately take benefit or, or continue to wait out at home for power and or water or heat to be restored. And so it might be a couple of days delay before there's an influx of people in need of the shelter. So what this agreement does is give Beecher Road School a town building, but also give it in addition to all the purposes it serves on a year-round basis, to add a layer to be able to use it as an emergency shelter, supplemental emergency shelter location.
Thanks for that, Al. So I'm going to ask if there's any discussion once we get a motion on the floor here. So do I have a motion? Go ahead, Joyce.
I move that we authorize the use of Beecher Road School as a town emergency shelter during a disaster.
And do I have a second? Megan? Joyce Shavers made the motion. Marcia, Megan seconded it. Is there any discussion?
Yes, I just want to, you want to go first, Joyce, or no?
Oh, go ahead, Dan. Go.
Okay. So I just wanted to bring to the attention of the Board of Ed, and not to saying that I don't support this, but I also want to make everybody fully aware that by designating the school as a shelter, it changes the building requirements for the school. And although I know we've asked the building official, whether or not this is the case, I fear that he may not have understood the question. I know for certain that when you do a construction project, the designation of the building as a shelter makes it required to be seismically protected and also wind restraint protected. So that can add 10 to 20% to any kind of capital expenditures we're going to do. For example, this repair on the piping that we will do in the near future, we could be required to provide additional bracing in that area of the piping that we would not need to provide if we were not designated as a shelter. Because infrastructure for the building needs to survive any kind of catastrophe, i.e. earthquake, hurricane, or whatever the building's supposed to be sheltering you from. So it has to be designed to a higher level. And so like I said, it's 10 to 20%. And ultimately, regardless if it's Center School or Beecher Road or some other town-owned building square footage, right? They're gonna have to pay that dollars to upgrade that building to be seismic and wind restrained. But I just want to, since it is the building that we are responsible for in our budget, it will reflect negatively on any capital expenditures we try to do as a Board of Education. And I know that there's a provision in there that says that they'll pay for those additional expenditures. So it's just important that we as a Board of Ed know that we need to have that broken out of our proposals so that we can ask the town to pay for that out of their budget versus our budget. And I'd also mention maybe the town might want to consider sunsetting one of the two buildings if they don't need all that square footage for the emergency shelter, because why pay the 10 to 20% additional for CapEx projects if you don't need all that square footage? So just something to float out there to the town. If they're considering Beecher Road as an alternate, maybe it should be the primary. Maybe we should sunset Center School as the area of refuge so that the town's only paying the 10 to 20% extra on one set of square footages. And that's my comment.
So we could get, for example, a new roof, which would be necessary in the case of a hurricane.
At 20% more.
But we'll note that in the minutes just so that the board has it documented, Dan. Thank you. Joyce, did you have something else, or were you just hoping to get in the roof?
Oh, no. No, that was a nice surprise. So I was just wondering whether we ran this by our attorney. Do we need to? Do we not need to? Like, what is the protocol? What should we be doing?
So we had, in addition to the town, we had town council Jerry Weiner review the document. Important thing to remember is that obviously it's a town building, so that interest was certainly preserved, and it was something that we did not feel that it was necessary to run by board council, that there'd be some redundancy in addition to Attorney Weiner's review.
I mean, it's not that I don't trust Jerry, that has nothing to do with it. But it just seems a little odd that you have an attorney that represents both sides. I understand it's a town building, but look, I just want to put that out there that typically if you enter into an agreement between two parties, you wouldn't have one attorney represent both parties. I'll leave it at that.
I think, Joyce, I would just respond that it's two town agencies that are entering into the agreement. And so hence the town attorney is representing that.
And again, if there's a desire to have board counsel review the document, we can do that. In full transparency, there was the hope and intent that, Mother Nature is unpredictable. So if there were to be an early season event, it was hopeful that we'd have this plan in place should there need to be an alternate emergency location. The other thing to keep in mind is the agreement can be terminated with a 30 days notice. So there are a couple options, but again, first and foremost, if there is a level or an appetite to have board counsel review it, we can certainly table tonight's action pending board counsel review, or we could move forward with it, again, with the necessary consensus, so that if there is a need and an event, there is an alternate location in sight, during which time we could also have board counsel review, and if there were any issues that warranted being revisited, we could come back at a later date. So a couple options on the table for the board to consider.
Look, I'm not eager to incur more legal expenses. So if there is a custom in other towns that this is how it's done, then I'm good with that.
Well, and this is obviously to a larger scale than when, the recreation department, for example, utilizes Beecher Road School for its activities. Similar pattern, but larger scale. So and that's why, frankly, I did not reach out to board counsel. I felt it was more than sufficient layer with Attorney Weiner's review, and that ultimately the asset and the liability is with the town.
Al, thank you. Are there any other questions or Jeff Townsend?
Maybe this is really just a comment, but I would actually turn it around a little bit and just comment that if it is sensible, one might do a slight review of those changes or construction or facilities things that we would want to do at the school for which the expense would be of value to the school. Because while we're in that agreement, that extra expense will be paid by the town and not by the school. So to be thinking about it proactively in that way, it might be advisable as well.
I think it's a fair point. And as Dan pointed out, it can certainly be included in our long-term planning. And as is typical at the monthly facilities committee, when we build our grounds and projects list, that we could build that in going forward so that at least the discussion and the identification and the discussion can begin.
Oh yeah, I wasn't kidding about the roof, by the way.
Any way we can get it done, Joyce, right? Okay, Anyone else? I don't see any hands, so I'm going to call the roll for the vote. Laura? Yep. Megan? Yep. David? Thank you. Jeff Hughes?
Yes.
Joyce? Yes. Mike?
Yes.
Jeff Townsend? Yes. Dan Cowan? Yes. Lynn Piasek? Yes, it's unanimous, Marcia. Motion passes. Thank you. I would just note in terms of the last thing for Facilities Committee, our next meeting will be Friday, December 11th at 7:30 a.m., I believe. Finance Committee. Joyce.
Okay, we are projecting a deficit of about 104,000, but it actually is about 120,000 when you factor in the board's liability for the school lunch program. So for any family that is out there that is listening, your participation is needed. So this is like a once in a lifetime deal. If you can opt in for those free lunches, you help not only yourself, but you help the school as well. The deficit is primarily driven by the 288,000 unbudgeted expense of hiring 4 additional teachers to support the current teaching model. The offsets and grants have allowed us to reduce the projected deficit to about 120,000. Al, this month, calculated all the COVID-related expenditures, which amounted to 420,000. So it actually was quite interesting to add it all up and see how much we were paying for all of the costs that are associated with trying to protect everyone. But that number does include the cost of hiring the 4 additional teachers. The state coronavirus relief and CARES funding cover a little over 100,000. And unfortunately, it's not clear that more relief is going to be forthcoming. So we're just going to need to continue to find other ways to offset the deficit. The finance committee looked at staffing for the remote team. As you probably recall, the board previously proposed offering dedicated TA support to the remote teachers given the very, very large class sizes. And at this moment, the additional expense of hiring a TA needs to be considered very carefully, especially in light of our already significant deficit. Christine has confirmed, however, that 1 TA could be reassigned to the remote team. And because there are no budgetary implications with reassignments, this move does not require any board approval for the administration to go ahead and implement it as soon as possible. At our next Board of Ed meeting, we talked about reviewing the operating budget. And as part of that discussion, we will be requested to consider a tuition proposal by the pre-K team. And lastly, we met with the extended day senior team, and they are running an operating loss of 54,000. About half of that is unemployment claims. Their fund balance is currently at 65,000, but it is quickly dwindling away. The unemployment claims are significant and they are an unknown quantity. So there is concern that extended day would not be able to stay afloat without support from the board to help with overhead costs. I think all of you received the note today from Extended Day, and they have decided to suspend services for at least the next several months in the effort to kind of slow down the hemorrhaging. And the hope is that they will be able to resume services at a future point. The committee, the finance committee proposed that the board would float the overhead expenses that the extended day program would have to pay until May, when we decided we would revisit the issue and see what the unemployment claims would look like at that point. I do want to just say that extended day is an extension of Beecher, and it offers a huge service to many of our families in our community. These are really very challenging times, and it's very sad that the extended day program has to be suspended for a few months. But a couple of reasons that contributed to this situation is that we had additional staffing requirements for the cohorting, lower participation rates among families, and there have been significant and unpredictable unemployment claims, which we have talked about. So the hope is that we will be able to bring back extended day in the future, but for now it is suspended.
Lynn's offline for a second.
Oh, she is. Oh, okay.
I have a comment to make on that, if
yeah.
you allow me. So I just want to emphasize one thing that Joyce said, and that you know, the unexpected employment claims were part and parcel with coronavirus and some of the unemployment predicaments that were produced by programs that were put out by the federal government. So that's just one thing to keep in mind there. Also, historically, E-Day has been a self-supporting program, and although I totally agree it is a wonderful extension of the school community, that it needs to be a self-supporting program, is not an expense that we can really burden as a school district. So I think it's important that we all, everyone who values it, make sure to, like, similar to the lunch program, right? It's like, if we don't use it, we'll lose it. So, you know, I think that when E-Day comes back to us as an option, you know, participation will be key for them to be successful, because they will have to run a self-sustaining model again at that time.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is, let me just say that the next meeting is scheduled for Monday, December 14th at 6:30 p.m. Correct, Joyce, for finance?
Yeah, wait, did you say it's a Tuesday before, right? The next board meeting?
No, it's the Monday before, Monday the 14th.
Oh, okay.
Is that right, Al? Yep, Monday the 14th, 6:30 p.m., finance. The next action is ESG measurement and verification extension. Al, do you have any comments on that before we make a motion?
Sure. So if the board were to choose to move forward with this, it would be year number 4 for the measurement and verification analysis, which is where ESG, the contractor that did the Beecher installation and upgrades, takes our utilities consumption and measured it against our baseline consumption pre-project upgrade, and shows us how they have delivered at minimum the guaranteed savings. Years 1 through 3, they showed report findings that they exceeded the guaranteed savings. And they do this with conversions and things like pre-conversion, we were burning oil. And so it's the price of oil versus the price of natural gas. You know, this was discussed a few times at Facilities Committee, and members did see a benefit of continuing at least one more year to get another year of data in the hopper, if you will, to be able to accept with confidence or a greater level of comfort that indeed there is a savings realized. One thing to note, that should the board opt not to continue with year 4, you can't opt back in. So once you opt to discontinue any annual measurement and verification, there is no going back. You draw the line in the sand. And in this case, the last year of data would be year number 3, which ended in May of 2020. The investment for this is just shy of $11,000. We budget a provision for this in our utilities line item. So there is a provision set aside for this. If the board were not to move forward with it, it's potentially identifies an area of savings that we can use to offset the $104,000 that currently stands as the projected loss. Right.
Al, were you all able to have that discussion with ESG to potentially make adjustments to their baseline assumptions because of COVID, closure, or because of any of the energy savings efforts that we underwent ourselves?
So there were a series of discussions at facilities as well with representatives, specifically when the ESG representatives presented their findings. So Joyce, in my layperson terms, the answer is a qualified maybe, in that, the school has done some adjustments to settings since the installation. In addition, the school and partner with the town, Dan, for example, earlier referred to the LED lighting upgrade. So that is something that indeed was not part of the building upgrade project, but certainly is something that generates savings that ESG is able to include in their baseline comparisons.
Right, so they get credit for our separate efforts, independent efforts.
Correct.
And so by continuing on for the 4th year, Joyce, we would have the opportunity to actually dig in and ask those questions and actually get those details out. If we choose that we're not going to do this 4th year, then all that becomes moot, right? So I'm like one of the people that are asking that we do continue on the contract for the 4th year, specifically so I can dig in with Al and ESG and make sure that we get credit for our LED lighting upgrade. Also, if any additional expenses due to corona-related ventilation rates and things like that happen, this is a good way to third-party verify those expenses in the same time. So if a federal program or state program says, if you had these expenses, we can point to this document, which was third party. So it serves a benefit for that as well.
Right. And you also mentioned, Dan, right, in your experience that the decline in savings happens as you move through subsequent years as well, right? So that extra year to see is helpful. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, can we have a motion and then we can have discussion?
Sure. I move that we continue the measurement and verification report with ESG for 1 more year.
And do I have a second? Megan? Joyce made the motion, Megan seconded, Marcia. Is there any discussion? Further discussion? Okay, we'll call for the
What I
vote.
said there to here.
Say again, Dan, I'm sorry.
I said cut and paste what I said there to here.
Okay. Thanks for that. Okay, Laura?
Initially, I was going to say, let's save the $11,000 since we could afford, we can try to save wherever possible. But then after Dan's explanation, it did make sense that we do move forward with keeping them and trying to recapture some monies in different ways. So that's it. Thank you.
You're muted, Lynn.
Lynn, yeah, you're muted.
I just made the statement. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, you want, we're voting on the motion now,
Oh,
sorry.
okay. Oh, all right. Positive, yes.
Thank you. Megan? Thank you. David? Yep, thank you. Jeff Hughes?
Yes.
Joyce? Yes. Mike?
Yes.
Jeff Townsend?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And I vote yes, it's unanimous, Marcia. Motion passes. So I guess, Al, you work the magic and make it happen.
I will. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. We're moving on to Policy Committee report. Megan.
Okay, so we met for policy last week, November 10th. We reviewed the 4 policies that we extracted from our consent agenda. Basically, those overarching, those policies kind of are 2 policies, but for staff and for students. The first was mask policy, and the second was Title IX policy. So again, for staff and students as separate policies. I guess a quick overview. I mean, we made some minor changes to the mask policy. We agreed to push it forward, but there was disagreement in the group about the details of that, which is why Dan asked to extract it. I guess maybe we can take one at a time. I don't know. I think this is the time that we're going to discuss it. So let's just start with the mask policy. A quick overview is we already had a mask policy. We had put one in place over the summer, or towards the end of the summer. And this was modifications to that policy based off of many recommendations from CABE. Essentially, it provides more context to the suggestions made. It provides some examples of what might qualify. And it also provides a broader definition, a clearer definition of who can actually provide exemptions to the mask wearing. I don't know if there are any other thoughts on that.
Some of these revisions also, I'll just add, Megan, were the result of legislative changes as well.
Thank you, Lynn. That's actually very important because that's required that we make some of these changes. So I'm in full support of the language that's in there. I think we have to make decisions as a board if we're not approving the language to be taken. We're not voting on that today. We're just saying if we're going to put it up for the 30-day review. So if folks are not 100% sure, if they haven't had enough time to really dig in, you can still say, yes, it's up for 30-day review, but I want to take the next up to 30 days to think about that, and then we can always come back and discuss it more if need be. I'm not sure if everyone's had a chance to thoroughly read through these or not.
So I had just one question on the student mask policy. I noticed on the personnel mask policy, we struck out students because the policy was specific to faculty, staff, and visitors, personnel, certified and non-certified. I'm wondering if we shouldn't, on the student policy, strike out faculty and staff and just leave students and visitors on that policy. I thought that we had part of that discussion during the policy committee, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we did discuss that. I'm okay with that if that's what the consensus is. I think part of it was that a lot of times the policies, when there's mirrored policies between staff and students, the initial opening language will be more broad, so it's kind of clear who the overarching policies apply to, and then it kind of focuses in on that population. So I think that's why the language included that. Dan suggested that we move students. I mean, I think that's fine either way. I mean, I don't know, to backtrack a little, and Marcia, not to put you on the spot, but are we actually disadvantaging ourselves by removing students for the for the staff policy, and then vice versa, because it doesn't kind of give that overarching indication that there is a policy for this other group.
The language was originally exactly the same in both of those policies. That was the reason in leaving it there.
Right. Right. So generally, it's fine to just cater it. I think we've done that for other policies as well. So that's fine. What you suggested, Lynn. Dan, I don't know if you want to discuss your concerns with this policy.
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment on, actually, I'll say it for both of those policies, right? So both the student and the staff policies for mask wearing, I'll express my concern again that I don't think it's the appropriate place for a policy. I think it should be more of a rule or a handbook, type thing, not a policy. I feel like policy can be used against us legally and could possibly pose a problem. And that was my original complaint with the original policy. And then also on these updates, a lot of them are opinion or supporting opinions. And so I asked my fellow board members to look at what the opinions that we're supporting are and make sure that you truly agree with them. I don't really see any need for us to support the Department of Education's proclamations. We're bound by them anyways, and for us to go through and add pages to a policy just to say we support the Department of Education is a given. So I think it would be better if we removed all of that opinion/supporting language. And so please consider that over the 30-day review. That's it.
I just add, I believe the word support was actually, wasn't it, to be a different word in the document in our policy meeting. So there wasn't anything about supporting, as I recall, the Department of Education, but rather just channeling our policy so it was appropriately aligned with
Correct. We changed the word from support to acknowledge. I apologize for misspeaking. So the board acknowledges again and again the position of SDE, and I don't think that's necessary for us to acknowledge the position of SDE either.
Well, as I believe I said in our meeting, I think that part of this is to provide structure and guidance to schools. This is, this is a policy that's only going to be active during a pandemic like this, and it will sunset after the pandemic has gone away, which is hopefully sooner rather than later. But for now, it's showing that our rationale for why we're requiring masks, and I think it gives very clear examples and support for that reasoning.
In the past, when I wrote policies, basically we always got legal guidance, and at the same time we always tried to follow the State Board of Education policy, because otherwise you're going to get into trouble legally if they differ. So I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah.
Right, and that's kind of the point, is this is what's expected of us, so let's make sure we're being clear to our families, staff, and everyone, so it's not unclear.
Part of the lights with that is, as what the state says changes, now we have to re-update our policy again, right? So if we don't say it and we just say we are in compliance with these laws, then we're in compliance with those laws. Putting a bunch of opinion in there, as opinions change, there's a statement in there that masks are effective, blah, blah. And, we know neck gaiters are not, right? So that's an example of the research has changed. We know new things, and, but the policy is stuck in the 2020s.
So let's look exactly at what the State Board of Education states, what the template is. and, basically follow that.
So I think back to what you said though, Dan, is policies are designed to not be so specific that you can't have any flexibility within them. They're designed to provide guidance and overarching structure for what to follow. But yes, of course, state statute and all that will always supersede the policy if there's differences in that. So I think the language that we have now allows for that growth in the sense that, okay, so we learned that about gators, great. So that's good practice to know, and maybe that's something to talk about at the school level or whatever level that is. But that could be part of a regulation potentially. But that practice is still be implemented, even though we don't have a note in here saying gators are not, working so well.
I have to just interrupt at this moment. I haven't wanted to start on this public health policy debate, but the scientific evidence is not against the use of neck gaiters in particular. It all depends on what the material is made out of, and all kinds of things. There was a bogus study from Duke that argued that they weren't effective, but that was misrepresented both by the scientists and the press. So I think we should stop repeating that neck gaiters comment because it's not a scientific fact that they're problematic. They can be problematic just like any mask can be if it's not effective in blocking the face in the proper way.
Thanks, Jeff. I hadn't heard about that follow-up information, so I appreciate you sharing that. Again, things will change over time, but we need to have something in place with guidance. So I don't know if anyone has any other questions or comments on the masks before we talk about putting them on the consent agenda. I'm not really sure if I have to make a motion to go back to that. Marcia, do you have any guidance for that?
Actually, what you would do at this stage is you accept it for 30-day review.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. So, I don't know if we want to do, well, I guess we can do the policies all together overview and we'll come back and we can separate out if need be. So the second group of policies, like I mentioned, is the Title IX. This is a new policy and it's mandated. We should have something on the books right now, so we do want to push forward with this. We didn't actually make any suggested changes. I think the only thing that we weren't in 100% agreement on, in particular, was the language around choosing, sorry, I should have the language right in front of me. So we needed to choose either preponderance of evidence under the standard of evidence and written determination or clear and convincing evidence. And I know we went back and forth on it. We talked about it and thought about it. We did get recommendations from legal saying that preponderance of evidence is the way that we should go on this. That was the way that I was leaning as well. And basically, my understanding is the language that's in the document now is acceptable. It chooses preponderance of evidence, and Lloyd was checked in with just to make sure, and he also agreed with that as well. Again, I don't know if folks had a chance to look at it, but there's definitions to those lower in the document in the, what am I trying to say? So the policy itself doesn't actually have the definition in it, but the second part of the document, why am I forgetting what it's called?
It's the administrative regs.
Thank you. The regulations do clarify the definition of it. Which actually I'm realizing I don't think is this.
It's document 2.5.3, page 18 out of 26. Step 4. Underneath the checkboxes shows the two definitions.
Thanks, Sam. So I propose that we put these on for 30-day review. And I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments.
So hang on a minute, Dan. Hang on a minute, Dan. Megan is that a motion? Megan?
I guess I was a little confused if I have to make a motion because it was already supposed to be up for 30-day review.
I think you do because it was taken out of consent agenda.
Okay, sure. Yes, I would like to make a motion to put these 4 policies back on for 30-day review. Back up for 30-day review.
Jeff, are you seconding?
Yep.
Jeff Townsend seconded. Marcia? Okay, now is there any discussion? Dan?
In regards to Title IX, I would just say that the clear and convincing evidence standard prevents us from frivolous lawsuits. And I would ask the Board of Education to consider using that as the standard, not the preponderance of evidence standard. There's a significant risk to the Board of Ed by choosing preponderance of evidence.
So I'm wondering where you have that information from, because our legal advice from our lawyers said to go with preponderance of evidence, that is what we should go with. And I'm assuming that they would have taken all of that into consideration of what might make us more liable.
So what makes us more liable is different than makes us more risk to frivolous lawsuit, right? So the preponderance of evidence standard provides a lower bar for a lawsuit to be placed against us, but is a more conservative standard. But the clear and convincing evidence standard requires a higher bar for the initial lawsuit to be brought, and so would make us at less risk for a lawsuit. So often, sometimes an attorney will give you the most conservative, not necessarily the most risk adverse. I don't know how to say it some other way.
Can I ask, Cheryl, I hate to put you on the spot, but is there anything, I know you did a great job of explaining this in our subcommittee meeting. Is there anything that you wanted to add to what everybody said? I think you were more eloquent with your explanation.
I'm not so sure I could be so eloquent, but when I spoke to Floyd, the way he clarified it was that the clear and concise had to do more with criminal type matters versus the preponderance of evidence was more school type matters. That's how it was explained to me.
Thank you.
And I think that this is a, sexual assault and discrimination and assault, which, can often lend itself to a criminal matter. So one might not want to make themselves at risk as an organization because the preponderance of evidence would make it easier to pull a lawsuit against the school.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, so the motion is on the floor to move the policies for 30-day review. We'll take our vote. Laura? Yep. Megan?
Yes.
David? Yes. Jeff Hughes?
Yes.
Joyce? Yes. Mike?
Yes.
Jeff Townsend?
Yes.
Thank you. Dan?
No.
And I'll vote yes. Motion passes 8-1. Dan Cowan voting against, Marcia. All right, so those policies are on 30-day review. We'll look at them again in December. Thank you. Megan, do you have a meeting scheduled? I didn't have a date in my planner.
Yes, the next scheduled policy is held for December 8th at 8 a.m.
8 a.m.?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. December 8th at 8 a.m. All right, you're on again, Megan, for CABE liaison report.
Yes, so I think we've, there's not a whole lot that they're suggesting that we talk about that we haven't already talked about. I think I've said it many times, but just in case, they have COVID virus resources on their website. If anyone has questions about things, if you have a chance to look through there, or let me know if you have any questions. I can connect with them. There is some constantly professional development, but what's coming up for board members if interested, and actually it looks like we missed that one, but continuing the conversation. So what we've learned and what we still need to think about. There's more information on that if anyone's interested, and then the board's role in communications. So there's a few opportunities for that. I think actually one thing, just thinking about more of a local level that I had read earlier, and perhaps everyone has already read this and knows about it, but Woodbridge has announced free testing this Wednesday for COVID from 2 to 6 p.m. at Amity High School parking lot. So I just thought that that would be important to say out loud, just in case anyone was not aware of it, to give folks an opportunity for that. And that's really it.
Thank you. Moving on to new business, 4.1, act on voluntary early retirement proposals. Do I have a motion? Go ahead, Joyce.
I move that we authorize the superintendent to offer the 2020-2021 early retirement incentive plans as presented to the respective WASA, WEA, CSEA, and CILU union memberships.
And do I have a second? Dan Cowan? Seconded. Any discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, we will now vote. Laura?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
David? Thumbs up, yes. Jeff Hughes?
Yes.
Joyce? Thumbs up, yes. Mike? Thumbs up, yes. Jeff Townsend?
Yes.
Thank you. Dan Cowan?
Yes.
Thank you. And yes, for me, that's unanimous. Marcia, motion carries. 4.2, authorized signer of the Woodbridge School District. So board members, you'll remember that we recently did this, and we gave Christine Syriac the authority to sign and represent the Woodbridge School District. So now we're asking for a motion for Dr. Jonathan Budd to be able to do that effective December 14. So can I have that motion?
I move that we approve Dr. Jonathan S. Budd as an authorized signature and representative for the Woodbridge School District effective December 14th, 2020.
And do I have a second?
I'll
Jeff Anderson? I saw you trying to make the motion, Jeff. But thanks. All those, you know what? I guess I'll call because that makes it easier for Marcia. Laura?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
David? David, I see you, yep. Jeff Hughes?
Yes.
Joyce? Yes. Mike Strambler?
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff Townsend?
Yes.
Dan? Says
Yes.
yes. And I vote yes. So that is also unanimous. That now means, Jonathan, you cannot run away. And he put his thumb up. Thank you for that. Number 5 is other. And so I have on other curriculum committee report. Mike Strambler, do you have a curriculum committee report?
No report other than we will be meeting on December 17th at 4:30.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping your report would be. Curriculum on Thursday, December 17th, 4:30.
May I ask what's on the agenda?
I believe, Mike, do you want to comment?
Yeah, so we're planning on making that a focus on the topic of remote instruction.
Perfect. 5, is there any other board members? Christine, any other from you? Okay. 5.1 is public comment. Is there any public comment?
I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Do you want to enable the chat? Because it seems like some people don't know how to raise their hand. I see the chat is enabled as well. I see no hands raised either.
Okay. Hearing no public comment, I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Lord,
Move that we adjourn.
motion to adjourn. David, are you going to second that, David?
Yes.
Yes. Laura is making the motion. David is seconding it to adjourn at 9:29 p.m. I am going to ask one question. Is there anyone who is opposed to that motion? I see none, no abstentions. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. And a very happy Thanksgiving to all board members, administrators, teachers, and members of the public who have called in. Even though it is an extraordinary time for us, I do believe we have a lot to be thankful for. So I hope all of you take a moment to think about what you're grateful for in your life. Have a good one. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Lynn.